There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. The program sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, here by the grace of God. This program does appear on YouTube. It's available 24/7. Just look at What in the World is Going On by Richard B. Schaff. Should be able to find it. Let's take a look at the virus outbreak. It's now been declared by the World Health Organization as a global emergency. The confirmed cases have jumped tenfold worldwide. This particular article comes to me from the Hannity staff, and I'm quoting them when I say that the World Health Organization declared the outbreak sparked by a new virus in China that's been reported to be in more than a dozen countries on a global basis and is now a global emergency as of the 30th of January of this year. This after a number of cases spiked tenfold in a week, as reported by the Associated Press. Multiple airlines have severely reduced their routine flights to mainland China. This is of Wednesday. They cited growing concerns over the deadly virus over the outbreak. British Airways was the first airline to suspend all flights to China. A second airline, Indonesia's Lion Air, said that it would halt all flights to China starting Saturday, the day I'm taping this broadcast, February 1st, 2020. Taken together, the airlines' move serve as a harbinger of more cutbacks to services to the Chinese mainland as safety concerns rise and demands drop sharply. This all triggered by the virus' rapid spread around the globe. And I point out to you folks that this is a major problem, and it is now considered a worldwide problem. Another report from Thursday, the 30th, points out that the World Health Organization now said at least 212 have died from this global emergency. The World Health Organization said late Thursday that it has declared the outbreak a global emergency as cases spread in at least 18 countries. The highest figures from the one province figures the total death toll in China to be at least 212. China's National Health Commission is expected to release a new national figure later on Friday. And I want to point out to you folks, even as I'm looking at these, the reports change as to what time of the day it is. So don't get hung up on a number and say, well, I heard it was blah, blah. The number is changing hourly, particularly from China. The latest figure takes the total death toll for China to be at least 212. China's Health Commission is expected to release new national figures later on Friday. This report came to me on Thursday night. There have been a further 1,220 cases detected in that one province of China alone, and they look for this to be effective as of January 20th, taking the total for the province alone to close to 6,000, this according to their own health commission. Nearly 100 cases have emerged in other countries. It spurred cuts to travel, outbreaks of anti-China sentiment in some places, and a surge in demand for protective-free masks. In this province, some 60 million people are living under virtual total lockdown as China seeks to contain the epidemic. The World Health Organization's Director General praised China's response in a news conference in Geneva last Thursday evening, but said the WHO was concerned about the virus spreading to countries that did not have the resources that they have to deal with it. The main reason for this declaration is not because of what's happening in China, but because of what's happening in other countries, he pointed out. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread to countries with weaker health systems than China. The WHO move will trigger tighter containment and information sharing guidelines to all country, but may disappoint Beijing, which has expressed confidence it can beat the quote, devil virus. Another report, same subject, different source, comes to me through Natural News. They point out that the Chinese government is keeping the virus infection numbers artificially low, and they do this by limiting the supply of medical testing kits. The Communist Chinese government is keeping the official tally of infected coronavirus patients artificially low by limiting the supply of diagnostic testing kits. This is a warning from an independent journalist in China who leaked the information to the Epoch Times. The outbreak of the Chinese virus is far bigger than the official numbers released by China public health authorities, who cover up the severity by limiting the number of diagnostic kits to the hospital. This again reported in the shadows from an independent news publisher. The insider and the independent journalist both say the diagnostic kits are only provided to certain, quote, qualifying hospitals, end quote, and in very limited quantities. Medical personnel at these hospitals have said that the number of kits they are supplied is less than 10% of what they need to fully test the patients. That means the official numbers from the Chinese government are likely just 1/10 the actual numbers. The current government figures claim 4,607 infected patients in mainland China. But if diagnostic testing kits are being artificially limited to just 10% of the demand, the real number of infected patients may be something closer to 46,000. Interesting, a team of researchers from Hong Kong University recently announced that according to their research, at least 44,000 infected patients already exist in China. Further, they estimate the number of cases is doubling roughly every 7 days. By early May, they predict China will be seeing 150,000 new cases each day, which would obviously overwhelm every laboratory, hospital, and healthcare clinic in the entire country. China has already ordered schools closed until March, underscoring the urgency of the efforts to try to bring this outbreak under control. Meanwhile, human-to-human transmission has already been observed in Canada and in Taiwan. The official Chinese government figures now have reached 4,682 infected. That's a jump of nearly 50% from the day before. This means that even according to the Chinese government, the infections exploded nearly 50% in one day. Now, the United States is also guilty, we feel, of covering up the truth about the virus. It's not just China that's covering up the truth. The United States is also covering up the truth about the pandemic. That's because Trump needs the stock market to remain propped up by whatever, even if it's irrational exuberance. And they fear that it will bring down the stock market and it could cause the bubble to burst. Thus, the truth about the virus spreading in the United States can never be acknowledged, or there's a risk the stock market bubble will collapse once people's overzealous faith in the bubble is shattered. Both China and the U.S. have the means and motive to bury the truth about this, ultimately placing over 1 billion lives at risk in order to control the narratives. And we know, folks, that one of the biggest reasons they say that Trump is going to be reelected is because of the good economy. A related article, same subject. The cover-up begins, and China threatens social media users with 7 years in prison for reporting pandemic news that doesn't parrot official stories. This goes back, dateline Tuesday, January 28th. That's Tuesday last week. From Natural News, with the infections having leapt nearly 30% in one day in mainland China, U.S. health authorities are rolling out a parade of lies about the risk the United States might face. The number of fatalities attributed to the virus have already surpassed those of SARS, and the number of infections and deaths is increasing at a parabolic rate. Hundreds of commercial air flights from China continue each day, delivering potentially infected Chinese citizens to large cities around the world. This includes New York, London, Miami, Los Angeles, and Toronto. The transmission of the virus is so high that every one person who carries it, even when they show no symptoms, can transmit the virus to 2 or 3 other people. This results in an exponential growth rate that quickly cascades out of control. According to the study published in The Lancet, this virus strain has a 15% fatality rate and an 83% infection rate for those exposed. The roughly 8-day incubation period is characterized by high contagiousness that combined with a bizarre lack of fever symptoms in some carriers. This further contributing to the spread of the virus by allowing stealth carriers to bypass airport screening. Good point for me to point out, folks, that as of today, Saturday, it's official that any flights from China coming into the United States have to go to one of 7 cities in the United States. There we have supposed super screening facilities that they hope will be able to spot and contain the virus from coming into the States. China is burning through 100,000 full-body health hazard suits each day. This provides a strong hint about the real scale of this pandemic, despite the official figures released by the Communist Chinese government. That government, by the way, has gone out of its way to artificially limit the supply of the kits in order to suppress the number of people confirmed to be carrying the virus. Now, the government of China has issued harsh warnings to silence social media postings from users who are trying to survive the quarantined cities, which now encompasses over 56 million mainland Chinese. As the Epoch Times reported earlier, the outbreak of this virus has made many mainland Chinese realize that the Communist Party and its media mouthpiece do not tell the truth or tell the whole story. Social media users, especially doctors and nurses, share their experiences and post videos on social media to alert anyone of the true situation, which the authorities do find embarrassing. People who tell the truth online are accused of spreading rumors, just like happens in the U.S. Individuals who dare to report the truth about the lack of supplies or the true numbers of the virus infections are accused of, quote, spreading rumors, end quote. And that, according to them, is a tactic that smacks of Big Ten censorship in the United States. The Epoch Times reports about this warning from the Communist Chinese regime, and I quote, a variety of unsubstantiated comments posted to the internet constantly stir up public panic. All those who spread fake news or thus disturb social order will face up to 3 years imprisonment, detention, or disciplinary action. Those who have caused serious consequences will be given a 3 to 7 year prison term. That's right, listeners. Prison sentences for anyone who questions the official lies of the corrupt government. Sounds a bit like the tech giants' operation here in America, doesn't it? Sure does when it comes to vaccines and chemotherapy reporting. Anyone who questions the dogma of the corrupt establishment is immediately condemned as a menace to public health. China, it seems, is borrowing big tech's playbook to deal with the inconvenient truths that they don't want the public to hear. The first casualty of every pandemic, never forget, is the truth. China mirrors Google. All pandemic news forbidden unless it comes from official sources. Following in the footsteps of Google, which forbids all news sources unless they are official sources. Fake news from the corrupt establishment. Well, China's also announced that all pandemic news is forbidden unless it comes from official sources. A leaked document from Cyberspace Administration of China also stated that starting on January 26th, all social media groups are forbidden to publish any news about this form of pneumonia that are not from official sources. The police will arrest all those who spread unconfirmed news. Folks, this is much the same sort of twisted delusion that's required of Americans who are demanded to pretend that Joe Biden isn't a corrupt grifter or that Hillary Clinton isn't the head of a political manifesto that eliminates political enemies as a routine operation.